The Galactic Federation had always underestimated humanity despite their unmatched technological prowess and military might. The humans were seen as a peaceful diplomatic species, but when an unstoppable alien threat known as the Devourers began consuming stars across the galaxy, the true nature of Earth's power would be revealed in the most terrifying way imaginable. Admiral Norks of the KRTH Empire watched in disbelief as his once mighty armada was torn to shreds by the Devourer fleet. Their weapons were useless against the enemy's impenetrable shields, and armor ship after ship burst into flames. The screams of his crew echoing across the comms as they were vaporized in a matter of minutes. The pride of the Krullo military had been reduced to space junk. This is Admiral Nord to any ships in range. We need immediate assistance. The Devourers are unstoppable, he shouted desperately into the comms, praying to the gods that anyone would answer his plea. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched another cruiser explode, the flash of the detonation reflecting off his scales. The bridge shook violently, sparks erupting from overloaded consoles as the ship's shield struggled to hold against the onslaught. Alarms blared red, lights flashing in warning as the whole integrity dropped to critical levels. Crew members were thrown across the deck, some impaled by shards of metal, others crushed under falling debris. The ACD stench of burning flesh and melting plastic filled the air, choking, and overwhelming static crackled in response. The silence broken only by the muffled sounds of distant explosions and the frantic reports of his officers. The cowardly Federation races had abandoned them, fleeing to defend their own borders rather than stand together against the common threat. Norks pounded his fist against the console in rage and despair, the metal denting under the force of his blow, pain lancing up his arm from the impact. This was how it would end alone, and outmatched against an enemy they couldn't even scratch, watching helplessly as his people were slaughtered like cattle. But then a new voice broke through the static calm, and confident amidst the chaos, an island of stability in a sea of destruction. Admiral Norks, this is Captain James Dawkins of the Terran battleship Indomitable. We're inbound to your position. ETA 2 minutes. Hold tight. Norks blinked in surprise, his mind racing, trying to process this unexpected development. The humans were coming to help. He had never put much stock in the soft silver tongue turn with their talk of peace and cooperation, their constant meddling and moralizing. What could their measly 5 ships possibly do against thousands of Devourers? It was like throwing pebbles at a ramp-aging beast, a futile gesture of defiance against an unstoppable force, a waste of lives and resources. Still, he wasn't about to refuse aid, futile as it may be. Any chance at survival, however slim, was better than none at all. Understood, Captain Dawkins. We'll do what we can to cover your approach, he barked orders to his remaining ships, directing them to form a defensive perimeter around the human vessels to buy them as much time as possible. It was a test to the skill and bravery of his crew that they obeyed without hesitation, even in the face of almost certain death. Even as their comrades continued to fall around them, they knew as well as he did that this was their last stand, their final chance to make a difference before the end, to die with honor and purpose. As promised, the human vessels dropped out of warp speed moments later, aligning themselves between the remaining cloth ships and the Devourer horde, sleek and predatory, bristling with advan-aimed weaponry. They looked like sharks among minnows, wolves among sheep. Nord expected them to open fire immediately to unleash whatever primitive weapons they possess in a vain attempt to slow the enemy advance, to buy a few more precious seconds of life. But they simply held position, engines thrumming with barely restrained power, shields shimmering with an eerie, almost otherworldly glow, as if waiting for something, as if they knew something he didn't. Captain Dawkins appeared on the view screen, his face a mask of calm determination, his eyes hard and unyielding as tempered steel. Their Was no fear in his voice as he spoke, no hesitation or doubt, only a steely resolve that seemed to radiate from every pore to fill the very air around him with an aura of unshakable confidence. Admiral, I need you to order all ships to fall back to a safe distance. We're going to end this here. And now Norak scoffed his mandibles, licking in irritation and disbelief at the human's arrogance with 5 ships. Don't be absurd, human. We should retreat and regroup with the rest of the Federation fleet. Live to fight another day. Even as he said the words, he knew they rang hollow, knew that there was nowhere left to run, no reinforcements coming to save them. This was their last stand, for better or worse, and humans were offering them a way out, a chance to survive. However slim, Dawkins shook his head, a hint of steel entering his tone, a flicker of something dark and dangerous in his eyes. There won't be any more help coming. It's just us, and trust me, that's all we need. There was a cold, ruthless glint in the human's gaze that sent a chill down nor spine, a predatory hunger that seemed at odds with the Terran's reputation for diplomacy and restraint. With their facade of civility and benevolence, it was the look of a hunter who knew his prey was cornered, and helpless, a wolf bearing its fangs in anticipation of the kill, a shark scenting blood in the water against his better judgment, against every instinct screaming at him to fight to the last. Norix found himself ordering his battered fleet to pull back, to put a sizable gap between them and the Devourers, to trust in the humans' plan and their strength. Dawkins, to all ships arm the Nova bomb and prepare to fire on my mark, the captain said calmly, as if he were ordering a routine maintenance check rather than unleashing doomsday itself. As if the fate of the galaxy didn't hang in the balance, NX's eyes widened, his heart skipping a beat, his blood running cold in his veins. A Nova bomb. He had heard whispers of the human's ultimate weapon, rumors pass around in hushed tones by those who claimed to have seen it in action, who spoke of its power with a mix of awe and terror, a device capable of igniting stars, of reducing entire systems to ash and dust, of snuffing out billions of lives in an instant. But surely such a thing was just a myth, a story told to frighten gullible fools, to keep the lesser races in line. No species would be insane enough to create something so destructive, so utterly devastating in its power to wield the very forces of creation as a weapon. Fire, a blinding white light erupted from the human flagship, so intense that Norx had to shield his eyes, his retinas burning with after images, his skin blistering and peeling from the heat. When his vision cleared, he saw a missile streaking towards the center of the Devourer formation, trailing a wake of shimmering energy that seemed to warp the very fabric of space around it, that bent light and time to its will. The enemy ships scrambled to evade their movements, suddenly frantic and uncoordinated, their formation breaking apart like a flock of startled birds. But it was too late, far too late. The projectile detonated, and for a moment it was as if a second sun had been born in the void of space, a searing ball of plasma that consumed everything in its path, that burned with the fury of 1,000 stars. An unbearable wave of heat and radiation washed over Norak, ships shorting out systems and nearly cooking him alive in his own skin, boiling the blood in his veins and the air in his lungs. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut just in time to prevent a hull breach, the metal groaning under the strain as a ship bucked and heaved like a wounded animal as it was tossed about like a leaf in a hurricane. When the sensors finally came back online, Norak stared at the readings in numb horror, his mind refusing to comprehend what he was seeing, to accept the impossible truth before his eyes. The Devourer fleet was gone, completely atomized by the blast, reduced to nothing more than bits of molten slag drifting aimlessly through the debris field. Then cosmic dust and echoes of screams in the space of a single instant. The humans had accomplished what the combined military might of a dozen races had failed to do, wiping out an enemy that had seemed invincible just moments before. That had brought the galaxy to its knees wholly. Norks breed equal parts awed and terrified by the display of power, by the sheer scope of the destruction he had. Just witnesses stood in stunned silence, their expressions mirroring his own shock and disbelief, their faces pale and drawn with the realization of what they had just seen, of what it meant for the future of the galaxy. They had just witnessed something that defied all logic, all reason, all the laws of physics, and nature, a weapon that could snuff out the lives of billions with the push of a button, a force of destruction that made even the most advanced civilizations seem primitive by comparison, that rendered all their achievements and ambitions meaningless in the face of such overwhelming might. Admiral, I strongly suggest you return to your superiors and make it crystal clear not to mess with humanity, Captain. Dawkins growled, his voice dripping with menace, with the promise of violence. Barely held in check. We're done playing nice. We've shown restraint until now, but if anyone threatens us or those under our protection again, we will end them permanently without hesitation or mercy. The human ships vanished back into warp, without another word, leaving Norks alone amid the irradiated graveyard of his enemies, amid the shattered remnants of his once proud fleet. He thought of the arrogance and dismissal with which the other races had treated the Terran, the way they had scoffed at their offers of friendship and mocked their diplomatic overtures, the way they had underestimated their strength and resolve. And a bitter laugh escaped his throat, echoing hollowly through the bridge, through the empty halls and corridors of his ruined ship. They had no idea who they were dealing with. None of them did. Humanity wasn't a harmless newcomer to be pushed around upon, to be played in the great game of galactic politics. They were an apex predator, biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike, to show their true colors. And now their fangs were bared for all to see, dripping with the blood of their foes, with the promise of retribution to come as Norks limped his damaged flagship back to the nearest Federation outpost. A grim realization settled in his gut like a lead weight, like a cancer eating away at his soul. The humans didn't avoid war because they were weak, because they lacked the stomach for violence and conquest. They avoided it because it would be too easy for them to win, because they could crush any opposition with a mere fraction of their true strength. And gods helped the poor bastards who gave them a reason to remind the galaxy of that fact, who provoked them into unleashing the full might of their arsenal. The debriefing was a solemn affair, as Norks recounted the horrific might of the human nova bomb before the Federation Council, as he described the carnage and devastation he had witnessed firsthand. The representatives of various races murmured and shifted uneasily, growing more alarmed with each detail, with each word that fell from his lips like a hammer blow. By the time he had finished, even the most militant species looked ready to sue for peace at any cost, their bravado and bluster evaporating like mist in the sun, like shadows before the light of truth. We are so General Crux of the Voric Empire muttered, his craggy face pale and drawn, his eyes haunted by the specter of annihilation. If the humans wanted to conquer us, there's not a damn thing we could do to stop them. They could wipe us out with a single shot, and there wouldn't even be ashes left to bury dust to mourn. What I want to know is why Chancellor Voss asked, his brow furrowed in confusion and concern, his voice trembling with barely suppressed fear. If they possess such devastating weaponry, why not use it before now? Why let themselves be seen as weak, as pushovers to be exploited and manipulated? The Terran ambassador, a tall, broad-shouldered man with piercing blue eyes, rose from his seat, his movements fluid and graceful, his presence commanding the attention of all present. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on each representative in turn, as if he could see unto their very souls, laying bare their deepest fears and doubts, their darkest secrets and desires. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, rich with the weight of history and the wisdom of ages with the quiet confidence of one who knows his words will be heed. Because we learned the hard way that war is hell, he said, his expression somber, and grave, his eyes distant with the memory of horrors past. We lost billions to our own savagery before we finally broke the cycle, before we realized the futility and madness of our ways. Cities reduced to rubble, entire continents laid waste by the weapons we created, the monsters we unleashed in our quest for power and dominion. But we never forgot how to fight, how to kill. We just chose not to find a better way. He leaned forward, brack in his hands on the table, the muscles in his forearms flexing with barely contained strength, with the coiled power of a predator ready to strike. Humanity has always known that our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness, our greatest temptation and our greatest curse. Our capacity for violence is matched only by our capacity for restraint, for mercy and compassion. We do not seek war, do not glory in death and destruction. But if you force our hand, if you threaten our people or our way of life, we will end it swiftly and decisively, without hesitation or regret. The ambassador straightened, his expression hardening into a mask of resolve, into a visage of implacable determination. Let me be clear. We are not conquerors or tyrants. We do not desire to rule over others, to bend them to our will or crush them beneath our heel. But neither will we tolerate threats to our species or our allies, to those we have sworn protect and defend. The devourers learned that lesson the hard way, paid the ultimate price for their arrogance and aggression. Pray that you do not have to, that you heed the warning of their fate. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as the gravity of his words sank in, as the implications of his message became clear. The humans had hidden their true nature, not out of fear or weakness, but out of mercy and restraint. They had given the galaxy a chance to embrace peace, to forge a new path of cooperation and understanding. But they would not hesitate to unleash the full might of their power if pushed too far, forced to defend themselves and their ideals. The illusion of human frailty was shattered, the veil of their benevolence torn asunder. The slumbering beast had been awakened, and the universe trembled before its roar, before the fury of its wrath. In the years that followed, a new dynamic emerged in the galactic Federation, a new balance of power and influence. No longer was humanity seen as a newcomer to be patronized or exploited, a pawn to be moved on the galactic chessboard. Their council was sought on all matters of importance, their fleets called upon to quell the most volatile conflicts and maintain the fragile peace. Some races resented the shift in power, their pride bristling at the thought of being beholden to the upstart Terran, of acknowledging their superiority and might, but none dared challenge it openly. Not after the devastation they had witnessed, the horrors they had seen unleashed. The memory of the Nova bomb lingered in every mind, a stark reminder of the consequences of defiance, of the price of hubris under humanity's watchful eye. A new era of peace and prosperity settled across the stars, a golden age of discovery and enlightenment. Trade flourished as old rivalries were set aside in favor of cooperation, the flow of goods and ideas linking the one disparate corners of the galaxy, the bonds of commerce and culture binding them together. Scientific breakthroughs accelerated as the brightest minds from each species collaborated on projects that had once seemed impossible. Their efforts fueled by a shared desire to unlock the secrets of the universe, to push the boundaries of knowledge and understanding. And though the specter of human wrath loomed large in the collective psyche of the galaxy, it was tempered by an even greater respect for their mercy and restraint for the nobility of their character and the purity of their ideals. The Federation came to understand that the Terran were not just the mightiest warriors, but also the most stalwart defenders of the weak and innocent, the most implacable foes of tyranny and oppression. They were the shield that guarded the realms of the righteous, the sword that struck down the wicked, and the corrupt the beacon that lit the way. To a brighter future nor couldn't help but marvel at the change that had come over the galaxy, at the transformation that had been brought by the humans. Influence and example, in the span of a few short years, they had reshaped the very fabric of interstellar relations, forging bonds of friendship and alliance, where once there had been only suspicion, and hostility sowing the seeds of hope, and unity where once there had been only fear and division. As he looked out at the stars, at the vast expanse of the cosmos stretching before him, Norks felt a sense of hope and wonder that he had never known before, conviction that the best was yet to come, that the future held untold marvels and possibilities. The humans had shown them a better way, a path to lasting peace and prosperity, through strength and compassion, through the power of their indomitable spirit, in the force of their unwavering resolve. And though he knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, he was confident that with Earth at their side, the Federation could weather any storm, could rise to any challenge, and emerge stronger and more united than ever before. For the first time in his long and storied career, Norks allowed himself to dream of a galaxy free from the scourge of war and conflict, a place where his children and his children's children could grow up without the constant threat of annihilation hanging over their heads, without the fear and uncertainty that had plagued his own life and the lives of countless others. He dared to imagine a future where the races of the galaxy could live and work together in harmony, where the old hatreds and prejudices that had divided them for so long could be laid to rest, where the promise of a new and better world could finally be realized. And he knew with the unshakable certainty of one who has seen the truth with his own eyes that it was humanity who would lead them there, who would guide them to that shining future with the light of their wisdom and the fire of their courage, with the strength of their conviction and the depth of their compassion, not through conquest or subjugation, not through the force of arms or the threat of violence, but through the power of their example, through the inspiration of their deeds and the nobility of their. 'Cause as he watched the stars wheel overhead, as he felt the thrum of the ship's engines beneath his feet, in the weight of his duty settling on his shoulders, Norks offered a silent prayer of thanks to the gods, to the fates that had brought the humans to them in their darkest hour, that had given them a chance to be something more than they had been, to rise above the petty squabbles and rivalries that had held them back for so long, to seize the destiny that had always been theirs. For the turn were more than just the guardians of the innocent, the protectors of the weak, and the champions of justice. They were the torchbearers of a new age, the heralds of a dawn that would shine brighter than any that had come before, the architects of a future that would be remembered and celebrated for generations to come, and with them at the helm with their wisdom and their courage to guide the way the galaxy would never be the same again, would never again know the darkness and despair that had once threatened to consume it, for they had shown the way to a better world, to a future where all races could stand together as equals, united in their diversity and strengthened by their differences, bound by the ties of friendship and common purpose that would endure for all time. As Morg looked out at the vast expanse of the galaxy, at the countless worlds and civilizations that called it home, he knew that there was no force in the universe that could stand against them, no power that could threaten the peace and prosperity that they had worked so hard to build, not as long as they had humanity by their side, not as long as they held fast to the ideals and the values that had brought them this far, that had seen them through the darkest of times and the greatest of trials. For the humans were the light in the darkness, the hope in the face of despair, the strength in the face of adversity. They were the ones who had shown the galaxy the way forward, who had given them the courage and the resolve to stand up and fight for what they believed, and to defend the innocent and the helpless against the forces of chaos and destruction that sought to tear them down and as long as they remained true to that calling, as long as they held fast to the principles and the beliefs that had made them who they were. There was nothing that could stop them, nothing that could stand in the way of the glorious future that awaited them all. For the turn were the guardians of the galaxy, the protectors of all that was good and right and just in the universe. And with them at the helm the stars themselves would tremble before their might, before the unstoppable force of their will and the unbreakable strength of their spirit. The galaxy would never be the same again, and Norks knew that he would never forget the moment when he had seen the true FA of humanity, when he had witnessed the awesome power and the terrible beauty of their wrath unleashed upon the enemies of all that was decent and true. It was a moment that would be forever etched in his memory, a moment that would define the course of his life and the lives of all those who had been touched by the humans' presence, by the force of their example and the light of their wisdom. And as he stood there on the bridge of his ship, gazing out at the stars and the endless possibilities that lay before them, Norks knew that he was ready for whatever challenges the future might bring, ready to face the unknown with courage and determination, secure in the knowledge that he was not alone, that he had the strength and the support of the greatest allies the galaxy had ever known. For the humans were with them now and always, and together they would build a future that would shine brighter than the stars themselves, a future that would endure for all the ages to come.